Yeah, so chapter 2, it reviews things like the GDP, the real GDP, unemployment/unemployment rates, and finally government spending relative to GDP. I mean, these are things that, I mean, in my educational and professional journey, these were things I hadn't really thought about. I mean, this is probably sad to say, I hadn't thought about since my senior year of high school in economics. Shout out to the late Mr. Saraki. As I read that chapter, I was thinking you were trying to say that voters aren't even thinking about this.
Not at all.
Which is arguably the most important thing for this country, which is said to be one large corporation. And so people aren't thinking about the government spending consuming the GDP that we have these days. Is that where you were going?
Right. And it's kind of akin to, look, the government's always going to be inefficient, and it's got to juggle multiple interests of a lot of people in a democracy. So it's not necessarily an easy job that it has. But the one thing I always want to point out is, at what point is there too much government? Right now, we're at about 38% GDP. So 38% of everyone's money goes to pay for the government, state, federal, and local, right? People should be asking themselves the question, should government cost us 38% of our income? And no one asked it, because they don't research these figures. They don't study economics. They don't pay attention to economics. And what it's more akin to, so that the everyday American or person can understand this is like we're on the Titanic. And instead of obsessing about the big gaping hole, and this is a big gaping hole that threatens and undermines the entire integrity of the ship, people are there's so many layers removed from the bowels of the Titanic and the underlying fundamentals of the economy. They're still up on top decks eating sushi, and it's even worse. They're like, well, that person has 3 pieces more sushi than I do. Oh, he got the older glass of champagne. And this would be one thing for living in a dictatorship or a kingdom where the management of the government was not the citizens' responsibility, but it is ultimately our responsibility. And it's just, no one pays attention to it because it's boring. No one cares when the car is working. They only care when it's not. And a lot of times, if you don't maintain your car and learn about basic car maintenance, your car can get damaged beyond repair. And we're almost at that point right now where, like, if people we need an oil change, we need to replace the timing belts, all this. If we don't do it, this is going to be an irreparably damaged car. But it's not sexy. The lights are still on. People are still getting fed, so nobody really cares. If anything, they're ultimately envious and petty, worrying about, oh, well, they got slightly more than we do. And, oh, this is unfair, this perceived injustice. And I'm like, hey, we just hit an iceberg. Do you all want to get down here with some welding and blow torches and weld up the hole a little bit? But no one is interested in that. A lot of times just because they're simply not aware. But yes, the all economics is no different than the indicating lights or the numbers and data that you see on your car. What's the temperature? What's my tachometer reading? What's my MPG? And these things tell you how good the engine and therefore the economy is running. And right now we got a whole bunch of red lights showing up on our dashboard, but the car keeps on going, and people just, like Homer Simpson putting over a piece of tape over it and ignoring it. So, but yes, that is at least my argument, to introduce some rather simplified economic statistics for the reader to read, to kind of get the perception and the perspective as to how bad it is, or was 10 years ago.
Okay. Well, I can personally say, where I come from, people are not talking about GDP and real GDP and the percentage of the GDP that government spending is consuming. They're not talking about that.
Right. No one is.
We don't talk about that at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or any. We're talking about other things.
I know.
I want to thank